Okie doke. Okie doke. Let's see where we are. I believe we are live, but I don't know for sure. Let's see. Let's see where we are. Okay, very good, very good.
白岩学園3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。はい、こんにちは。
All right, howdy do everybody. So today is kind of a silly day, which is fine. I'm going to be reading just a little bit from the old book. Looks as though there's the possibility that Sen may be joining us, which of course would be just fantastic. If not, that's fine too. I can't complain too much. At any rate, there's a thing that I'm sure that everyone has been noticing, which is a general increase in the rhetoric. At the moment, the conflict between the nationalists and the internationalists is reaching a fever pitch, and it is absolutely crazy to watch. Who is that guy? Reza Aslan was saying something about how Trump supporters need to be eradicated, whatever that means. Of course, you know, the big debacle with the movie about what was it like? I don't remember. Something about hunting MAGA hat wearers or something to that effect. Yeah, crazy shit is going down, and all of the anti-gun rhetoric is getting to the point now where they are basically declaring firearms owners domestic terrorists. I mean, this is out of control. This is absolutely out of control. This is nuts. This is crazy talk. And I don't know what to make of it outside of, holy shit, the Boogaloo is actually coming into view. There's, I'm using the phrasing from a Tim Pool video. He said something about how the Civil War is coming into view. And I don't think that it's going to be one of those deals where we're going to have guys squaring off or something. I'm beginning to think at the moment that the Civil War that we are looking at is likely going to be mostly fought in courtrooms and on city council boards, and all that implies. And the other fun thing will be, of course, there'll be random crazies that just do nuts things a la South Africa, and they'll be given carte blanche. Now, the key point here, though, is that I'm serious too. I honestly think that the real Civil War is going to be fought on city councils and in courtrooms. I'm serious. I'm not joking in the least. And I think that the correct move is to get into local office. If you are in any way of a mind to be able to deal with bureaucracy and all of the painfully boring bullcrap that goes along with the formalism of those sorts of proceedings, do it. Get in there. Do it. All 7 of you. But yeah, the point is that we're drawing into an area where our basic civil liberties are not only in question, not only under attack, but largely irrelevant and meaningless now. Look at it from the standpoint of, as of this moment, I, Eke Lux, in Los Angeles, I cannot go outside and speak my opinion on anything. Earlier today, I was in my local grocery store, and I was speaking with someone who was pretty blue-pilled, but he had 1 or 2 ideas that were breaching awareness. And he was saying something about how this was interesting, because this is a place that I go to often. One of the employees at the store that I go to, I don't know which one, and I don't want to know which one, because I don't want to look at them with a cross look, but one of the employees at one of the stores that I go to is an LGBTQIA plus P advocate, and they were of the opinion, I was told this on good authority, they're of the opinion that anyone over 40 needs to not exist because they're too old and their ideas are too entrenched. This is identical in form to what they were doing in Soviet Russia. This has been talked about in many Marxist contexts. Youth culture. They are more malleable than the old. And lo, this is exactly what's going on at my local, one of my local grocery stores. Now, as we were talking, of course, in my own head, I just started fast forwarding through all of the arguments and thought processes that would come along with this. You've got your elderly being taken down, for want of a better phrasing, with the youth coming in. Now, the issue here is that you've got people that believe things that are ungood, double ungood indeed. Now, if you've got new people being born all the time and old people dying all the time, which of course is the case always at all times, one of the big things that you need to control for is the information getting into the young people's heads, because that's much more important. So, what do you start doing? You have to start taking the information itself out. So he said, this guy in the grocery store, he said something to the effect of, yeah, people who are older than a certain age, they need to go. And it took me about 3 seconds to process all of it. To which I said, yeah, but I mean, after a certain point, you're going to start burning books. And when I said that, a fellow white chick directly next to me, in my peripheral vision, I could see her stop and stare at me. And I knew that she was a fellow white. For some reason, I just knew it. And in my own peripheral vision, I just kept going, and I basically ignored her. And this is what I mean by the First Amendment is functionally dead, because I was talking about this within the context of a conversation that someone else had initiated, and I was allowing them to direct it. And the only thing that I did was offer a single insight, and that was it. And that was enough for a fellow white to look at me, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, to look at me with a strange look. This is where we are. This is just where we are right now, you know. And that's to say nothing of our God-given right to keep and bear arms. I mean, my gosh. Simply going outside with the ability to defend myself is now counted as a felony here in Los Angeles, according to, oh my gosh, I forget what it is. There's a court ruling, and I can't remember what it was. Anyway, it was in D.C., and it had something to do with a person who wanted either a concealed carry permit or an open carry permit in D.C. And the idea, everything hinged on you do in fact have the right to defend yourself outside of your own home. So the Second Amendment carries outside of your front door. Which of course they fucked us on here in California, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, on a federal level, you are able to, actually that's the story I was about to go into anyway. On a federal level, we do have the right to defend ourselves outside of our own home. Here in California, however, we are in a double bind. You do not have a right to conceal carry, and open carry is prohibited. So you are on a federal level, we are federally allowed to defend ourselves, but on a state level, this is a may issue concealed carry license state. They may or may not issue you a concealed carry license depending on what they call good cause. And also open carry is illegal here, which means that you are only able to defend yourself if the communist-occupied California government decides that you may defend yourself. The people that are in charge here in this state are absolute villains, complete and total villains anyway. The thing is that there is basically no First Amendment. There is basically no Second Amendment. So anything that happens here in Los Angeles, I can't talk about it. And if anything happens to me directly on a physical level, I can't defend myself against it. So basically, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of a victim waiting to happen. And it sucks. It's not fun. I gotta get the hell out of here. Anyway, I keep thinking to myself that there are other states that are going to be a little more amenable to my thought pattern and to my sensibilities, and that's where I want to go. I think that what will end up manifesting, again, coming back to the motif of a civil war happening within city councils and in courtrooms, the way that all of this went down, the way that we got to the point that we're at right now, is that basically state legislatures decided that this is going to be the case, and city councils decided that they were not going to push back. And anyone that decided that they were going to shirk the law, the imposed communist law, they are maliciously prosecuted by the courts. We are at the mercy of traitors and villains. It's just the way that it is. So the only realistic option is to go to a place where there are fewer traitors. And I think that it will probably... We'll probably end up seeing, quote, safe spaces, sanctuary cities, white reservations, whatever you want to call them. I think we'll probably end up seeing that on a long enough timeline. Where will these places be? I don't know, but the only realistic option to push back against what's going on in the federal government really is to localize. It's to create a calico patchwork of landing pads, safe spaces, areas where we can go and not feel too hounded. I honestly think that's the only realistic possibility. Anyway, with everything that's happening right now, all of the events that have been happening in, for example, El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, I think there's going to be another one or two, by the by. Today, Epstein was found suicided in his cell. Well, it's a body. Oh, freaking hey, buddy, how's it going? Freaking Holly and Ox Stoner here. This is like a nice little mix here. Jonathan Pohl here is too. Is here too. This is outstanding. Anyhow, with Epstein having been suicided, they are doing what they can to try to break the news cycle. And the thing that they focused on was, I think it was in Detroit, but I don't recall. They found a person in a honeypot scam that was willing to be the dupe, the rube, the fool that would go along with the FBI. And they have declared him to be a white nationalist or a neo-Nazi or God knows what. And they've decided to put him in the news and say, look, we found an evil white man doing an evil thing. Which, of course, I haven't formally looked into it, but the pattern for the past, decade has basically been FBI makes a honeypot, scams someone into doing something retarded, then they do it, and then the FBI is like, wow, look, we caught one, even though we were the ones that, gave them all the materials and the plans and everything. But they're looking to do another shooting, or they're looking to do something to distract from Epstein. And of course, this is a 1-2 punch. First, they get to distract from Epstein, and second, they get to push for red flag laws, confiscation, so on and so forth. So my fear is that what we're probably going to end up seeing for the next decade is the internationalists clamping down hardcore in the largest swaths that they can, and there will only be imagine you've got a cellophane, right? A large cellophane sheet. You put it on a counter, and there are going to be aberrations, and so little bubbles are going to pop up as the cellophane hits the counter. And those little tiny bubbles, that's where we are. We're the bubbles that pop up and say, no, we don't want to deal with that cellophane bullshit. And they'll try to poke down on the cellophane. They'll try to, do the same program on the bubbles. But they're going to find that it's sort of like, with the bubbles on the cellophane on the counter. You push down on a bubble in one place, it's going to pop up somewhere else. And that's what we're doing right now. We're in the middle of a giant whack-a-mole game, and I'm not looking forward to some of the instances, because I think it's possible that what could end up happening is there will be an instance where they push down, and some of the people will not be able to just vacate, like myself. Or maybe they vacated 2 or 3 times and they're just tired of vacating. I don't want to move to a city and try to establish roots just so that I can, just so that I have to uproot myself again. That sounds extraordinarily unpleasant, and I don't want to deal with that. At that point in time, they're basically fucking with people's lives, and that's not cool. They're already fucking with people's lives anyway right now. I've lived in the same city for within about a 5-mile radius for about 20 years now. They're absolutely destroying what used to be my life, so I'm already in that position. Jonathan Pohl said something, and let me go and check and see what it was. Nebraska is better than Southern California. Volga Germans are honest, unlike the undercover Israelis that make up over half of the whites here. Yeah, I am very familiar with the fellow whites here. Let's see here. There are whites in Cali. Ove. I have seen at least 3 white people here in California. Jonathan Pohl says, watch where you put your member. If you are really hard up, go to Europe and get a working girl. Oh, man, I would love to get one of those. That'd be great. Let's see here. Oh, Goose made a telegram. Nice. Let's see here. Goose, just go ahead and drop your... Oh, yeah. Oxstone is at... okay, Goose Bear, drop your telegram info in the chat. I'll copy-paste and then I'll message you. Oxstone asks if I have looked into banking. Yes, I have. It would require approximately $5 to $6 million, I don't remember which, to get a bank started in another country. And at that point in time, we would be able to do some banking, but the thing is that I don't know how effective it would be. It would have to be for like specific kinds of uses or something. Like, it would have to be so micro. It would have to be for like one community or whatever, like a freaking city or township. I honestly think that the correct direction to go for banking would be to get onto city council, or get some guys in mayorship or God knows what, and charter a bank. Just make one. Just do it. And go that direction and not worry about it. Because sooner or later, we are going to reach a situation in which the internationalists are going to make it impossible for nationalists to pay rent and eat food. Of course, we all have lots of examples of individuals with their bank accounts having been shut down. That's already happening. And I am not talking about anything that's small. I'm talking about something that's large scale. In fact, Poseidon in chat knows just a little bit about this, because Poseidon has had his channels shut down. He's been put into a position where he's had to take down his videos, that every time you upload a video, you get some monetized. Of course, his videos have been demonetized, so this is another example of an attack against his ability to simply generate money, to pay bills, to keep the lights on and everything. But it's going to move from just people like Poseidon, who is a very slim fraction of the population. It's going to increase. The footprint is going to increase, and that's the major issue here. And that's why I think that we're going to need to start thinking about basically banking. We're going to have to start thinking about banking for for us. We're going to need to think about having a nationalist bank. Okay? I don't mean a national bank. I mean a nationalist bank. A bank that is specifically amenable and sympathetic to us and people like us. I honestly think that that's the only possible direction long term. And so, again, I say this is another example of the split between the large scale, the widespread, the big cellophane wrap on a counter versus the little tiny pockets and bubbles. I think the only real way to go is to just create pockets and bubbles. So local banking, local politics, local laws, local enforcement, and a complete, or at least as much as is possible, a rejection of larger federal powers. For Poseidon in Greece, that would amount to a rejection of the European Union, and instead a focus on Greek politics. And that's kind of what we're going to have to do here in America. I think we're going to have to, exactly, liberated zones. I think that's the kind of thought pattern that I would like. And that's why I want to get out of Los Angeles, because in effect this is an occupied, it's occupied territory, and it's just not safe at all. Let's see here. Goose says, IDK, what Telegram info it is. My name on it is just Goose. Okay, that's fine, and it's connected to my phone. Okay, we're gonna delete that. We're gonna remove that. Remove. Okay. Let's see here. I am going to look for. Let's see. There's got to be a search option somewhere. Search Goose. Okay. Goose. No, it's totally incorrect. That guy's Russian. That's Cyrillic. Oh, that guy's also Russian. Cyrillic. Yeah, I can't find it. Let's find @Goose maybe. Yeah, that's weird. For some reason I can't find it. How very peculiar. Oh, nice. Apparently, let's see here. Now I have to go back to. No. How do I get out of this? Okay, there we go. Boom. Check. Add contacts. No, but I just want to say hi to Goose. How do I say hi to Goose? Message. Send message. Boom. There's Goose. Alright, now I've got to do this. Boom. Check. Copy. And Boomer Tech. Initiate. Alright, anyhow. So yeah, Jonathan Poles says that the Dakotas are good. Mostly Black Sea Germans. That's funny. Here, let me see if I can get over to Gmail, and I'm gonna give Jonathan Pole a link. I'm just gonna find him over here. Where are we? Jonathan Pole. Boom. Nice. And reply. Boom. Sent. Mr. Pole, first name Jonathan. Check Gmail. But yeah, I'm a great big fan of places like the Dakotas. Oh yeah, of course. What am I thinking? Obviously, naturally. Where are we? Boom. Check. Yes. Now that I think about it, if where are we? If Poseidon happens to have a voice box today, he was streaming earlier. If Poseidon happens to have a voice box, go ahead and check Twitter. At any rate, so yeah, my coming all the way back to the possible Boogaloo situation, my honest thought, oh, look at this, we've got a wild goose in the hangout. Let me go ahead and get myself set up here. One moment. Let's see, we're going to transition now. And how you doing, boss?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Looks like your audio is right about where mine is, so we're looking good. Yeah, how's things, man?
Things are good. I got some family in town, and
Nice.
got a little baby around. It's always fun.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Loves his uncle. Loves his uncle.
Yeah. No, family's huge. That's why we do any of this anyway. So my big thing at the moment is, perhaps I'm just a hair fixated. Please excuse me on that. But my big deal at the moment is actually the red flag laws. Do you have any thoughts or insights on this subject?
Oh, it's terrifying. I hope that our Supreme Court still means a damn. I did see some quotes. Actually, I think I screenshotted them. In fact, where this discussion has happened before. Back in like the 1800s, where they like affirmed you're not allowed to do this. Like they kind of did elaborate on the Second Amendment by saying like, no, it shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed, and it is entirely within states' rights to just disregard anything they try to do. But I don't know, man.
What court case was that? Do you know the name?
I would have to look at the screenshot, which means I would have to go out of Hangouts. I'm on my phone right now.
Oh, I see. Well, that's fine. It's not a big deal. I'm sure that...
I'll look it up and I'll send it to you later.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'll be very interested in, because as of this... And of course, I understand fully that in the game of Calvin Ball, rules get to be changed at a moment's notice with or without consent or notice. So even though this has already been decided, the first thing they'll say, yeah, well, that was then, this is now. We are now deciding differently in this new context that we have just decided is the more important context. So I'm fully cognizant of that, but at the same time, it would still be a fun thing to be able to point out and just say, hey, look, all of your bullshit arguments were actually talked about like over 100 years ago, so here's why you should go fuck yourself, and also, yes, do go fuck yourself.
I tend to be more blunt and just say, no, I'm pretty sure they wanted me to have rocket launchers.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we've got a Mr. Ove popping in. Hey, buddy, what's going down?
Just, making sure that everyone knows that, doing the Fed's work by keeping an eye on this stream, making sure that, all the right messages are being put out.
This is a stream of peace.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
This is a Christian stream, and we're all about peace, love, and understanding.
Wait, I heard rocket launchers just now. I assume we're talking about the Second Amendment or something like that?
This is pure satire.
All satire. None of it's real.
Oh, well, no, I mean, like, are we talking about the Second Amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Dude, rocket launchers, under the strict definition, rocket launchers should be allowed. I mean, dude, the Mick backyard nukes should be as loud as well, technicly. If you look at the case law,
if I had a rocket launcher?
Yeah, dude, that's what the case law says. There was a case that happened in the early 20th century. I forget which case it was specifically, but they talked about how This guy had a sawed-off shotgun or something like that, and they said that the guy lost the case. But if you look at the details of the case for why he lost it, he actually should have won, because the judge said that people are only allowed to use weapons that the military currently uses as well, because right, there's supposed to be the parity between the civilians and the military, right? But see, the judge got it wrong, because this is like during World War I times, where sawed-off shotguns were used in trench warfare and things like this. So the guy lost the case, but by the rationale of the judge who presided over it, he should have actually won. So when we talk about rocket launchers and nukes and stuff like that, it's all should be legal technically.
Hey, I'm gonna mute for a minute while I brush my teeth.
I'm gonna put the link to live performance by Bruce Coburn, If I Had a Rocket Launcher.
Oh, wait, can you guys hear me right now?
Yeah.
There is an echo going on.
Yeah, it's pretty hard echo.
Sorry, I put my headphones in. I don't know if that's kind of making it weird.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna mute while I go brush my teeth. So.
All right. Yeah, that whole thing about the the Second Amendment is a real pain in the ass to me, because what you're talking about basically is now a moot point anyway, because they just make up new rules all the time. So what ends up happening is there may be a particular ruling that is, quote, in our favor or whatever. And yeah, for a short, like for example, in California, I think it was earlier this year, there was a 1-week window in which standard capacity magazines were suddenly legal. And everyone, their brother, sister, cousin, best friend, aunt, uncle, and even neighbor decided that they were going to order standard capacity magazines and import them into California. And for 1 week, that was allowed for specific reasons. But of course, we're talking about communists, and all they do is play Calvin ball. So the moment that they recognized that this is going down, they immediately put everything into high gear so that they could shut it down. So after a certain point, my own thought process is, all of these wonderful rulings that seem to be in our favor, it doesn't matter, because they're never going to, they have contempt for us. They view us with disdain. They think of us as being lesser. So they're never ever going to decide that we're not peers. They're not going to regard us as peers. So
right, but that's more a problem with where you live rather than the law itself, right? I mean, California. I mean, of course, California is gonna, be as uptight as they are.
Well, I gotta stop you for just one moment there, and this is for a technical reason. I'm gonna go full-blown autistic, and I understand that, so you can roll your eyes at me and I'll completely take it. But when you say the law, for me it's not about the law. For me it's about our law versus their law. There is no the law. There is our law and there is their law.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Which is why, that's why I said, in California, of course you'd have that problem. But if you move to, some more, sympathetic state to the Second Amendment, then it would be a completely different story.
You mean like Switzerland?
Switzerland, I hear a lot of good things about Switzerland, but the actual technicalities of their law is actually a little bit, it's a little bit more restrictive than people like to give them credit for.
It's like Kurdistan. Everybody's part of the militia, and you keep the gun on the wall.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly, you're not actually allowed to keep the gun in your house. You have to keep it in like a communal kind of armory or something like that.
Well, then they've changed it. It used to be you had to keep it in your house because it could be mobilized from your house.
Oh, I could be wrong, but that's the last time I remember looking into Swiss laws. That's what it was. You had to have it in this kind of like community armory.
Yeah, they may have changed it. This was back in the 70s and early 80s that I'm
Yeah.
remembering.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably been changed since then. But yeah, I mean, yeah, dude, Switzerland, they do have some good laws. Like, yeah, everyone has an assault style weapon, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Well, I would just call it a rifle.
Yeah,
That's
rifle.
me.
Yeah, no, well, no. I'm speaking liberalese,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Oh, it was funny actually. Just real quick to follow up on that point, I was watching this liberal video where apparently Trump like blamed violent video games for these latest shootings and stuff like that.
oh yeah,
And so there is like a whole bunch of these video game YouTube channels that were like up in arms about it and stuff like this. And if you're watching a video game YouTube channel, it's probably liberal, most likely. And they were all saying the one video that I remember watching was talking about if people didn't have access to all of these automatic weapons, and it's just like wait a second, wait and I looked through the comments and I didn't see any reply to it, which shows how in the know these liberals are when it comes to guns. Automatic weapons are not. You have to. There's a lot of paperwork that you have to do, and you have to have like a really good background check to get an automatic weapon.
Yeah,
but they think that think that just because it looks like something the military uses, therefore it's a machine gun with a grenade launcher on the bottom, and But no, like most guns that you get out there, they're all semi-automatic, right? Which is a huge difference.
Well, but this is why I really am thinking more and more now that I'm not interested in even debating gun laws with anyone. Like, I don't really care. As far as I'm concerned, shall not be infringed is pretty fucking clear. And I don't want to try to convince a retard of something that they don't understand anyway.
Dude, I've got a great T-shirt that talks about that. It says, "This is my gun permit," and then it has like a picture of a card on the front, and it says, "Issued 1776, expires never."
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, gun laws are fake and gay.
Well, but that's my honest thought pattern now, and I know that makes me sound within the context of Los Angeles. That makes me sound a bit radical or extremist, but it's like, dude, like, it's a slippery slope.
Dude, being a conservative, being a Trump supporter is radical and extremist now. Like, there's no going back, right? There's no two ways about it. Just being a regular conservative means that you're a Nazi, right? So I mean, at a certain point, we're just gonna have to stop giving a shit, like what you seem to be saying right now.
Yeah, and that's why I keep thinking about going to a safe space, a haven, a place where I will be surrounded by more people who think like me. And the main issue here is, again, thinking about the cellophane on the countertop. Basically, what I'm saying is I want to go to one of those bubbles, and I know for a fact the first thing... Because if I know that these bubbles exist, so do the internationalists. What are the internationalists going to do? They're going to go to the same bubble I'm going to.
I was going to make a point earlier while I was gone. You guys were talking about leaving or basically going somewhere safer. It reminds me, a couple months ago, I believe the Kansas Supreme Court legalized third trimester abortion. And it just made me think, like, people think that any part of the country is safe for some period of time. I started doing some digging, and even in Kansas, at least 2 out of 7 of their justices were gems.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. They already know the same things that we know. They know the same demographic patterns that we know. Everything that you think is your card, your inside line, this is known. So this is why the main issue for me is going to a place that is closer in thought pattern, with the full understanding and realization that it too is going to be under incredible attack the moment I set foot in that town. Why? Because it already is under attack. They've already been attacking that same town for decades.
Yeah, dude, as far as I'm concerned, as soon as my lease is up next year, I'm getting the fuck out of California. I'm moving to North Dakota. If anyone wants to move to North Dakota with me, I think that's probably one of the better places to go because they have a very quality, stable state bank there.
Oh, yeah.
The Bank of North Dakota. It's basically like the closest you can get to a National Socialist bank.
Yeah, we've discussed this. It was founded in 1919 by a political organization that was specifically set up to end the banksters' exploitation of farmers in North Dakota.
Yeah.
And as soon as they did it, that movement was destroyed, and a lot of what they could do with the bank was actually rolled back. As early as 1919 was founded, but it got further than anywhere else.
It's still a better bank than anywhere else in the country, I would say.
But look at what it was originally tried to do. It was considerably. It wasn't just a bank initially. I mean, they had the governor and the state legislature as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might be right. I can't say that I've looked into all of the intricate details of it, but
yeah, they set up the bank and immediately there were attacks on it for being financed by people from New York City for some reason.
Oh. Yeah, the one thing that I am pretty cognizant of is that it's the only bank in America that has never had has never gone bankrupt or had a run on it. Like even throughout the Great Depression.
It's not federally insured.
Well, I mean, it doesn't even need to be though. Like if they're not even getting into any kind of musical chairs, hot potato kind of investments, then it's not even really. I wouldn't even really care about something like that, to be honest.
No, I think it's a lot better than any of the other alternatives that exist. I'm saying that what they initially planned to do was much better, and they already lost a lot of ground on year one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's to be expected, right? Anytime that you try to get out from underneath the gem's thumb, they're always going to crack down on you. But it's even in 2008, like when the 2008 crisis happened, the Bank of North Dakota came out. There was no bankruptcy, no kind of runs or anything like that.
Right, because it wasn't involved in.
Right.
Its charter doesn't let it be involved in economic activities outside the state, for one thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But I got a new word for today for people to look into. It's intifada. But
wait, I thought you said a new word to look into.
It is a new word for us.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. Support your local intifada. Okay.
Antifada?
Intifada.
Yeah, I know. I learned that word first back in 2005.
That's pretty late. The first intifada started in December 1987. I remember reading about the first day it started when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I was a senior.
The reason that I remember it, though, is because I learned about it in 2005. At the time, I was working at a department store with rather a lot, because of the specific store that I was working at and the location of it. There were quite a few fellow whites in the store. And as a joke, I wrote on a Post-it note, "Support your local intifada," and I put it on one of the computer screens. Boy,
awesome.
did I
That's
get
awesome.
an earful for that. That's all.
I
Just,
had a shirt I bought in London that supports Intifada, and it had a Fedayeen throwing a rock on the front of it with the slingshot.
yeah.
And I wore this around London all the time, and I would get Palestinian women coming up to me all the time. I love your shirt. Your
Nice.
shirt is so great.
Nice.
It was just like a chick magnet. It was like, wow.
All right, so
I'm not sure if that's like if that's a good thing, or if that's just a statement about how brown London has become.
no,
I
man,
don't know. This
this,
was back in 2000.
that's
This
Chad,
was during
bro.
the Second Intifada. This was after they destroyed Jenin. So this is 2002, 2003.
The Israelis, they love to talk about David versus Goliath, like going on what your shirt says, like a rock and a slingshot. Like, isn't that David? I mean, shouldn't they
That's
be all about that kind of
exactly
thing?
the imagery that the Palestinians were trying to co-opt, particularly since the original Goliath was supposedly from Gaza, an ancient Philistine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, there was a recent genetic study done on an ancient Philistine grave that purportedly links their DNA to Southern Europeans. So some people think that they may have been possibly Greek refugees from the late Bronze Age collapse.
Love it.
So that might explain some of the resentment. You know?
Yeah. Well, we all know the gems hate Europeans. So
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so the North Dakota thing seems like a good start in terms of having a bank that is at least stable. So that's cool. But I kind of feel like, okay, so there's one puzzle piece in one place, but we still got to be thinking about other places that we can go to assemble either interlocking puzzle pieces, or maybe we can expand on that one puzzle piece.
Well, geographically, you have North Dakota, which is the capital of Bismarck, then South Dakota, and then Nebraska, and then Kansas. So these are all the German from Russia states.
Yeah.
Wait,
Those are all
dude,
my people there.
I didn't know that the capital of North Dakota is called Bismarck.
Yeah.
Dude, now I
all
mean
these-
it's sold. I'm moving.
the population is like over 25% Germans from the Black Sea region of the Russian Empire, and then there's some Germans from other places. But I think after Germans, the next largest ethnic group are the Lakota. So the Germans
Lakota
are a large
Sioux.
majority.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sold. I'm there.
This is actually excellent news, because this means that once you wife up, you're finally going to get bleached. This is amazing.
What do you mean I'm finally gonna get bleached? What does that mean?
I don't know.
Is that an anti-spaghetic remark?
That's right. Yeah.
Pretty fair-skinned Italian, I think.
I've got blonde hair and blue eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, okay?
All right. Anyway, but no, I totally support going to North Dakota. It sounds like a great place. The only reason that I'm not interested in North Dakota is that let's see here. I'm looking at the map right now, and it's the eastern end of it is almost dead center of where that giant fucking. Every winter, there's this jet stream that pops straight down, and Arctic winds blast all the way down to like South Dakota.
That's the reason why most of the people there are still Black Sea German ancestry. All the other people were too weak to survive.
Yes, and Anglos. I have a lot of Anglo blood in me, and it doesn't get that cold in England. So,
Dude,
But it does in Siberia, so.
yeah.
I'm so tired of all of the fucking heat waves in fucking California that it's just like
Oh yeah.
I lived in Montana for about a year and a half, and like I went through a winter there, and yeah, it gets like negative 40 degrees, but it's just like, dude, I'll deal with that rather than fucking these heat waves that we have in fucking California. So.
It was 118 when I left Kurdistan.
Oh yeah, let's see. Shoot, fuck that shit.
Oh my god, dude,
You were
it's
in Kurdistan?
oh
I
my
was
god.
for 3 years.
Yeah, you're a historian, aren't you?
Yes.
Oh, that's very interesting. What were you doing over there, if I may ask?
Working.
He was an educator.
Yeah,
Educator.
I was attempting to educate the Kurdish youth. I educated a few percent, but not a whole lot.
I'm kind of curious, Otto. Like, what was in your curriculum? Did you like try to slip in kind of like red pill kind of subjects or anything like that, or was there like a strict kind of code that you had to adhere to, or?
No, I mean there was a textbook we had to follow and material we had to cover, but I basically covered Civ 102, which is from the Renaissance to modern day, as how global Homo developed, starting with the international slave trade.
So the way that I understand it is that Kurdistan is. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I've heard kind of this point of view from a partisan girl, or Syrian girl, or whatever her name is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but she's Arab, so she's going to be biased.
Yeah, she likes to say that the Kurds are basically under the thumb of the Israelis. Is that your experience, or?
No, the Kurds are split. The KDP, which is the Yellow Party, the nationalist party in Iraq, controls the Kurdish regional government in Erbil, and the two northern provinces, or I guess the governorates they call them, of Iraq, Erbil and Dohuk. It at one time between about 1966 and 1975 received training and arms from the Mossad along with the CIA and the Israeli Savak when they were operating outside of Iran. And when the Iranians sold them out and they were kicked out of the territory and their movement collapsed militarily after the Algiers Agreement in 1975, the struggle was basically taken over by the Green Party, which is currently control of Suleimania, which is where I was. And they had called the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. And they were formed in Syria and Lebanon, and they had very close relations with Old Man Assad and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is was the organization of George Habash and Layla Khalid. So after the first 7 fighters to die against the Israelis in the 1982 war in Lebanon were all Kurds that were with the PKK out of Turkey.
Hmm.
So it's split.
So were you in? Oh,
What?
excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask it. Were you working in Iranian, Iraqi, or Turkish Kurdistan?
I was working in Bashur, Iraqi Kurdistan.
Iraqi.
Yeah. It's the only place they actually have any type of autonomy that's
Oh yeah, I guess that makes
recognized.
sense.
So no, and the pay is horrible in Turkey for academics. I don't know. Iran, I don't think is a possibility because of bad U.S.-Iranian relations, but I wasn't there.
That'd be
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The whole Kurdish kind of angle to geopolitics that's going on, where Turkey is having none of it. They're very anti. Kurdish independence or anti-Kurdish. A lot of the Turkish geopolitics is, they see what the U.S. is trying to influence the Kurds to do, and they're just not having any of it. Now they're like buying the Russian SU or I'm sorry S-400 missiles, and they're being cut out from buying the F-35s and things like this. It's it seems like the Kurds are just like the major thorn in the side for like everyone in the region. To be honest, I mean, not
I
like
mean,
a bad way, but like it's a little bit funny.
well, in some sense, I mean, what you've had since the Safavids and the Ottomans split up the territory has been basically the Kurds fighting Kurds on behalf of the other regional powers, generally the Ottoman Empire or the various Persian empires, the Safavids and the Qajars, of course. Finally, before the Islamic Revolution, the Pahlavis. But right now, I would say that probably the best ally the Kurds, particularly in Iraq and Syria, and even Iran have, is the Russians. The Russians are the ones that negotiated the deal for Rojava to get its current status with the government of Assad in Damascus.
Right. Yeah. So by being allies with Russia, that means by proxy they're allies with Syria. And I remember hearing a story when Turkey was talking up how they were gonna, solve the Kurdish problem. All of a sudden, all the Kurds were like, "Oh, we don't have a problem with Assad anymore. Assad's actually a good guy. We're with Assad over the Turks."
Yeah,
It's
well, I don't think the really big problem of Java ever was Assad, or at least
no,
not
no, of
the
course
second
not.
one. It was more ISIS, which was being funded by Saudi Arabia, uh, which is why the Iranians were so keen to intervene to keep Assad in power.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting just how I don't want to say nuanced, but just how like it's such a clusterfuck
Yes,
the
that's a good
politics
word for
is
the Middle
in
East.
the Middle East. You got Turkey and Saudi Arabia who agree with each other on some things, but then you got the Syria and Russia and Iran agreeing with on other things, but then Turkey also agrees with Russia, and Turkey has problems with the U.S. as well, and it's just like dude, it's such a it's
It,
just
it,
such
it
a
just
crazy
it
situation.
almost makes you wish for just a unifying caliphate. I mean,
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but
I'm just kidding.
yeah.
I just want simplicity, man. I
Wait,
just,
wait, who let Claire into this stream?
God, if only you
oh
guys were
man.
down with the patriarchy. Fuck.
No, yeah, I'm so confused by Middle East politics, especially when Russia comes into the mix. I just don't know what's going on.
Dude,
From my experience living in Iraqi Kurdistan, and I was in Moscow in June, actually the Russians are a more positive influence than the Americans at this point.
yeah, fucking A. Yeah, I'll agree with that any day. It's too bad, that this whole Trump is a Russian agent shit is still going on, and I I'm starting to wonder if part of the reason for that propaganda is not necessarily for the domestic policy, like Republican versus Democrat, but more for the geopolitical policy, of keeping up the military industrial complex kind of war funding kind of thing.
Oh, so we get that scarecrow looking scarier, so we can get some anti-scarecrow budget
Right.
budget thing. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can see that. That's also domestic. I mean, that's really uh, it's a it's an internal problem driving external problems.
Yeah, definitely. You can't have any support for an external war without the internal support. Yeah, so there is kind of a symbiotic relationship going on there. Definitely.
But I mean, I grew up during the Cold War when the Soviet Union was relatively much stronger than it is today, and I don't see any place where there is any existential, yet alone. Well, I don't see a place where there's any serious threat to U.S. interests, yet alone any existential threat to the U.S. survival coming from Moscow at this point.
Yeah. I've got some questions for you about that, Otto. But I don't want to, Eke, I don't want to feel like I'm taking over your stream or anything. I don't know if there's any.
No, actually, this is gonna sound super lame, but I'm really freaking exhausted, so it's kind of pleasant to just kind of let the stream go on autopilot for the moment.
And
Sure.
you can do a pole position and pass out, and
Yeah, just let it all happen and be like, hey guys, all right, see you in the morning.
Dude, Otto, I'm missing your streams, man. I'm gonna have to get you
I'm gonna
all up to date.
start them up again. I've just been
Okay, good.
doing other things. I had to. I don't know. I went to the Persian restaurant today, and it was I forgot it was Eid, so it took like 30 minutes to get our order because it was like everybody and their mother was ordering food for the Eid parties, carry out from the one of the many, but it's probably the best local Persian place.
What is Eid? That's some sort of holiday?
It's
I
a Muslim
believe this is to
holiday.
celebrate the fact when Abraham refused to kill his son Ishmael, because
Okay.
in the Quran it's Ishmael as opposed to Isaac, and this is kind of an interesting difference. And the Jews claim that it should be Isaac on the basis that Isaac was legitimate, but the Muslims say that doesn't matter. Ishmael was born first. It doesn't matter whether he's married to the mother or not.
Okay.
Called like Eid Mubarak or something like that.
Well, Mubarak just means happy, joy.
Oh, okay.
Eid Mubarak means have a happy Eid.
Mubarak.
But there's two Eids. There's the Feast of the Sacrifice, which is what we're doing now, and then there's at the end of Ramadan, which was earlier, obviously. Ramadan is over.
Well, I have to say, while we're on the topic of food and holidays, Otto, man, you, me, and Eke are gonna have to get shawarma sometime
All right.
soon, or
Uh,
shawarma, or something like that.
any place. I'll email you a phone number, my phone number here, but I'm over right off of El Toro, not too far from where the old Laguna Hills Mall used to be.
Yeah. It's not Pardo. Yeah.
I'm actually much more down with traditional food, so I'd prefer that we get a burger.
That's fine. what is
I'm
what is
cool with
the what
anything.
was the what is that burger place? The one that over on Hollywood. All American Burger, is that the one?
I don't know.
It's like an ancient burger place that like all the famous people went to in the 1950s.
Oh God, yeah, I don't know the lore.
I think it's called All American Burger.
Oh, dude, Eke, you don't know what that is? You gotta.
Well, we can go to
I don't
Muzo
know
and
what it is.
Frank's and have
But,
lamb chops.
Let me just. I have to clarify this. I absolutely despise Hollywood. I do not like going there.
I do too, but occasionally I had in a earlier period of my life used the library at the University of California in Los Angeles, and it's over by that region.
Oh yeah. Well, if it's for work.
we'll figure it out. I'm looking forward to it. Oh shit! Now that I started talking about food, I forgot what I was gonna ask.
Something about Russia.
Oh, Russia. Yeah. Oh yeah. What's your opinion on the whole? Um, there's a lot of people that think that Russia is trying to set up a new Russian Soviet Union. And they point to Ukraine and Donetsk and Lugansk and things like that.
They are trying to recover as much territory as they can, particularly those territories that have a large ethnic Russian population. But obviously, their ability are much more limited. I mean, they were only able to take, and not even successfully at that, completely parts of eastern Ukraine. They did take Crimea, but they haven't done a very good job of administering it. They've taken a couple parts of Georgia, but that's about it. They haven't dared attempt to take northern Kazakhstan yet, which might militarily be the easiest, but politically would be the most difficult.
That's an interesting answer that you gave, because I feel completely the opposite. That from what you're saying, like when you say they took over Crimea, I mean, well, there's a few points about Crimea. One is that the there's been plenty of international um, polls done, asking what the Crimeans think about, this so-called, annexation or whatever of Crimea, and most of the people, something like 80 or 90% are, in approval of the
Yeah, no,
Russian.
but that's a replacement population.
I was gonna say, isn't Crimea like 80 or 90% ethnic Russian?
Yeah, but that's very recent. What happened is
Well, I mean,
they
well, what do you,
removed all the other people, then colonized it with Russians.
well, I mean, when you say it's recent, how recent are you talking about?
World War II.
Sure, but hasn't Crimea been Russian, under Russian control since like the 1700s?
It came under Russian control in 1789,
Yeah.
but the population only became majority Russian in 1945.
So I guess like I mean, you bring up an interesting point, but I mean, I don't know. It's if the people who are there today, don't have a problem with it, then I mean, how are we supposed to react to that?
So is Otto a Ukrainian irredentist with regard to Crimea?
No, no, no. I'm a Crimean Tatar irredentist.
Oh, Tatari.
But there's also was a large German population that was also they were the first group deported out of Crimea back in 1941. There were 50,000 Crimean Germans
Hmm.
that were removed to Kazakhstan. But the
German
big
Tatars?
population was Tatars, and the last of them were removed in 44 to Uzbekistan. So still about half of them living in Uzbekistan. So if you ask them, they would say that Crimea is theirs.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that, German Crimeans before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They started settling in 1804,
Didn't there used to
1805.
be Ostrogoths there a long time ago too?
Oh, this is much later. This is after the well, this is during the Napoleonic Wars, but a lot of the settlement comes after. There was a February 1804 manifesto by the grandson of Catherine the Great, so it would be Alexander the First, to repeat the settlement in the Volga, but in the Black Sea region, but it's stricter. There's a vetting. You have to have certain skills to be allowed to settle. But this is where you get this huge influx of hundreds of thousands of ethnic Germans into the southern Ukraine, including Crimea, during the 19th century. So you have a fairly large population, over 50,000 by 1941, a significant number of them Mennonites.
Hey, Otto, there's a question in chat from Tom. This entire panel is from California, isn't it? Are you originally from California, Otto?
Sort of. I was born in Boston, but my mother was born in Sacramento, and my father was born in Kansas on a military base, Fort Riley. But his parents had been in Sacramento. My grandmother it's a long line of people from Lodi. Like before the Civil War, they left Virginia and went to Lodi, and then when the Civil War broke out, they were really angry at Abraham Lincoln, and they were going to go fight him. But by the time they got their militia to the Nevada border, the war was over.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, to answer your question, Tom, I mean, maybe this is showing people that even native or somewhat native Californians, except for Goose. Goose is from Oregon. But
Well, I mean, both
I
of
have
my
family in
parents are
Oregon.
from here. Both of my parents are from here. They grew up here. The eldest child was born here. It was kind of a temporary stay in Oregon when I was born there, and I spent the vast majority of my life here. So.
My great grandfather and my grandfather, obviously, and his brothers lived some time in Albina, which was, even though they were Bohemian German, that area was all Volga German at the time. And I don't know what it is now, but when I went to Oregon in 2000, the area was all black.
yeah, so there you go, Tom. Even Californians are capable of having intellectual conversations. We're all not what do they call it? Fruits, flakes, and nuts. Yeah, not everyone in California is that. So
Sounds healthy, but it's not.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I wanna go back to this Russian imperialism kind of subject. So do you? I mean, to me, the way that I see geopolitics today is that the Russians are basically like the peacemakers. They are the ones who are. There was a time, for example, like to use Ukraine as an example. The I forget which it was, the Donetsk or Lugansk Republic that asked to be they asked to be incorporated into the Russian state, and Putin turned them down.
I believe it was Lugansk.
Right. Okay. And so, like, when you talk about Russia like wanting to take over territory, it just I'm not sure how much I
Territory
agree.
doesn't have to be directly annexed, though. I mean, they did not directly annex either Abkhazia or South Ossetia, but they effectively uh, have political military control of those territories.
But would you agree that those places have become more politically stable
Well, yeah, because
since?
the fighting stopped. The Georgians were lost to war and retreated, and the Abkhazians, Ossetians took control over the territories with Russian help.
Right. So I guess the point that I'm getting at is that when we look at Russian geopolitics, it seems that they're not necessarily interested in taking over territory for the sake of like expanding their empire. It seems that if when they exert their
Well, they have
influence.
limited resources, so they're obviously targeting those areas which are to their best interest and which they have the best chance of being successful.
Well, whoa, wait,
So,
wait, 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 wait a second, wait a second. If we look at Georgia and South Ossetia, um, the Russians were the second to act, right? It was only after the U.S. backed Georgian um, governor or president. It was only after he invaded South Ossetia that Russia acted.
well, yeah, except under international laws, it's not an invasion because South Ossetia was considered part of Georgia. But I mean, it's an opportunistic because there's a successionist movement by the Ossetians that the Russians intervened to support Ossetian secession.
Okay, so here, let me put it this another way. Do you see the U.S. geopolitical ambitions and wanting to further their influence into um, areas that are strategically vulnerable for Russia. I mean, you
Yes,
look
of
at
course.
right. So like when we look at South
Well,
Ossetia,
I'm not making value judgments here. I'm being descriptive.
mhm. Do you are you familiar with the what's his name, the journalist Graham Phillips?
Oh, I don't know if I am or not. Uh,
He's an interesting character. He's a Brit, but he's
no,
very like pro-Russian. He's
okay.
basically just like a freelance independent YouTube journalist.
I,
Um,
I don't know him.
yeah, I can send you his YouTube channel, but you can look up just Graham Phillips on YouTube and you'll come across him. But
I mean, I don't follow a lot of uh, contemporary news, but
well, so the point that I'm getting at is that when we look at from my perspective, when I observe Russian geopolitical moves, it seems that they are merely reacting to what the NATO, um, Atlantic Council, Globo Homo geopolitics are putting. They're shoving this in the Russians' face, and the Russians are just merely reacting in uh, an appropriate manner to prevent
uh,
the.
I think the Russians are actually. I don't think you're giving enough. But I think they have a longer and better thought out policy than just reacting at each event. But as I said, their resources are much more limited than they were during Soviet times relative to others. So this is where you can see where they can act, that they can be effective. But I suspect that they're much more have a much better thought out plan for, as it were, um, maintaining their interest. I
See,
don't think most of their interests are in expansion. I think most of their interests are in maintaining the territories they already rule over. But I think there is an interest, where possible, to, as it were, um, either retake territories that were predominantly Russian inhabited, or retake territories of secessionist ethnicities that are pro-Russian, like happened with Abkhazia and Ossetia.
I would actually disagree when we talk about the reaction question, because you look at. I mean, well, first look at what was it? When the Soviet Union fell, and the what was I forget what in Ukraine, or was it Poland, where the United States said we're not going to go any further east than this. We're going to have this kind of like little buffer zone.
Said we said we would go no further. We said we would not expand NATO eastward, and then Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, uh,
Yeah.
joined, and then Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia joined.
Hmm.
So it came up right against the Russian border.
Right.
Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but
Not yet. Yeah, not yet.
I don't
Definitely.
think it ever will be.
No, I don't
The
think so
days of
either, to be
expanding
honest.
NATO are over because for a variety of reasons. But
Right, and so there's that one example, but then there's also the issue, when we talk about Russian reactionism. You look at what happened in Libya, where this is when Medvedev was president, and Putin was the
Prime
uh,
Minister.
yeah, and that's when the Russians agreed to the no-fly zone over Libya. Um, and they said, yeah, well, all right, yeah, the America is gonna do what they're gonna do. All right, it can't be that bad, right? And then all of a sudden, like Libya went to shit, and now when yeah, well, I mean, maybe to preface this, you're familiar with General Wesley Clark's interview with Democracy Now! Back in like 2005 or so, where he talked about the U.S. wanted to take down 7 nations in 5 years, things like this.
Vaguely, yeah.
Right. So it seems like once Libya happened, the Russians were like
I
trusted.
agree with you that here's my thinking. The Russian policy took a while to get organized, but once they decided to intervene in Syria, once you had the annexation of Crimea, I think you had by that time they had organized pretty much a fairly coherent long-term strategy that for any major power is probably one of the better thought out ones as far as being practical. So what you're talking about is earlier when they were still kind of in this pre-organizational stage.
They were trying to be friends with the West, is what I would say.
Well, I mean, the friendly part was largely over. I mean, that was under the Yeltsin administration, which was a debacle, as
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
in many sense, and not least because Yeltsin was a complete drunk
No, he
and
was a
somewhat of a
puppet, I would
clown.
say. But yeah.
I mean, he was not the type of serious statesman that Putin is, in terms of being able to affect uh, Russian national interest, or I guess Russian state interest, better way to put it, internationally. Well, I think once the Russians were effectively able to do this in a couple places, and probably the first place was in Georgia, uh, then they were able to kind of figure out what was possible and what was not possible. But I don't think it's completely reactionary, because I don't think it would be as effective as it has been if it was.
So when you talk about Russian geopolitical ambitions, you say, if I'm correct, you said that they're merely interested in preserving their own territory, correct?
Well, primarily, yes.
Right. So I mean, is that not like the most authentic kind of geopolitics that could be asked for?
I've said it was they've had a fairly effective policy.
Well, I'm
Uh,
not talking about effectiveness. I'm talking about authenticity, like from
what do you
from
mean by
like
authenticity?
a morally authentic point of view.
Where they have a legitimate right to defend
Right.
their territory? Well, I suppose all states do in a broad sense. Although generally, I prefer to give rights to peoples rather than the states.
Wait, are you a secret anarchist, Otto?
No, I'm not an anarchist, but uh, um,
Yeah,
uh,
because I've heard that argument from anarchists before. Like, oh, we need to let people
yeah, but they're
decide their
usually
own
talking
thing,
about peoples in the individualistic sense. I'm using people in the sense the Russians would use the word narod, or Germans folk.
right? And see, and that's why I think that the Russians are the most honorable when it comes to their geopolitics, is because they seem to be most in favor of the folk.
Um, well, I mean, it's an odd beast, the Russian Federation. Basically, what they've done is follow in the Soviet model. They basically each of the various national groups gets its own little territory where they get to have control over the culture and education and other important institutions.
So here, let me put this another way then. Um, would you rather Russia be the dominant superpower in charge of geopolitics or America? Which would be a more productive system?
Oh, it's hard to say, but I would say that my personal experience is the Russians are much more positive influence in the Middle East, which is where I just came from, than the U.S. I'll
Well,
give
I
you
mean,
one.
the Middle East is where the Americans are focusing their politics, right?
I give you just one example how this works. I had to get a visa, of course, to go to Russia. So I had to go up to Erbil, the Russian consulate, which is basically it's like a drive-through. You stand outside and place your order to the guy.
At the Russian embassy is
A Russian consulate.
okay. Oh, interesting.
So they
Wow.
got one guy, but this one guy
Yeah.
gets there early in the morning, about 10, and he speaks fluent English. Of course, his native language is Russian. Fluent Kurdish, fluent Turkish, fluent Persian, right?
Hmm.
So he handles and does all the work at better quality, the one guy, than the 5,000 people we have hired at our U.S. giant sprawling U.S. consulate in Erbil.
Hmm. So but it's not really the question that I'm asking is not necessarily about services rendered, but what is the actual morality of what's going on there, right? You already kind of agreed with me when you say that Russia has a better political policy for the Middle East than the U.S. does. I mean,
Yes.
why wouldn't that translate to European policy as well?
Mm, because the relationships are different, obviously. Um,
Wait, you think that Ukraine would be better if it was under European Union control rather than
well, I don't know. I haven't been in Europe in a while. Well, I mean, I've been to Europe, but well, I guess if Moscow counts to Europe, that'll be the last time I was there, or maybe Istanbul. Was there after Moscow, but I, I, I can't. I don't know enough about, but um, I've
well, here let me
I'm not sure
just
that reconstituting the Soviet bloc up to the Rhine River would improve things for most of Europe.
um when you say the Soviet bloc, I mean, isn't that kind of, I mean, they're not Soviets anymore, right?
No, but there's it would be a kind of a geographical uh, replication as far as the territory.
Well, so there's actually a question in chat for you that I want to get to, but last question before I get to that. The When we talk about the Soviets and the Soviet influence, just before anyone accuses me of being a Jewish agent, yes, I am aware of Jewish Bolshevism. I'm aware of the Jewish influence in the Bolshevik system. So we can set those questions aside. But the thing that I find most interesting, maybe a little bit ironic, is that with all of the Jewish Bolshevik influence, the Eastern Bloc, the east side of the Iron Curtain, they today are more inoculated against the Western kind of globo homo pause. And
Yes.
so when we talk about the Soviet influence in the modern day, Like I wouldn't. I'm not sure if I would really have any problem with Soviet influence because it's going to be anti-global homo.
Yes. Did you see the stream that I did on the former East Germany where we talked about this?
I'm not sure.
I made it a whole stream and went on for hours. I mean, I only concentrated on East Germany, but because it's kind of representative of the idea.
Yeah, dude,
But,
East Germany's doing great. I mean, they're the ones that are voting for AFD. They're very anti-global homo.
yeah, well, the the AFD core are ethnic Germans from Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan.
Are they native Germans or like
No,
ethnically German
the
or?
Germans, the ethnic Germans are descended of people deported from the Volga and the
Okay,
Black
yeah.
Sea that returned as Aussiedler and Spätaussiedler.
Mhm. So
Oh yes, Guy King.
wait, so what's the point that you're making? I'm sorry.
I don't know. I'm just noting that a lot of AFD's core supported even further east than the former East Germany.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That seems to kind of prove my point even more. Yeah. Like,
The Russlanddeutschen.
yeah, a lot of the formerly Soviet, um, formerly Soviet administered states tend to be more um, inoculated against the kind of Western, Judaic global homo that's going on. So, when we talk about, Russia being in control of geopolitics in their sphere, I'm not sure if I really have a problem with that.
Real fast, like you guys, I'm really freaking tired. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let the stream keep going, and I'm probably just gonna drift off. I'm letting you guys know so that you're not confused. That's all. So
Don't panic like when the last time I passed out on my own stream. They thought I had died.
yeah.
They thought the Turkish intelligence had assassinated me.
Okay.
It's not a real stream unless you pass out on it. So yeah, don't worry, don't worry.
My only request is, or my only couple of requests is, no Fed posting and no personal attacks.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
basically it.
I don't think anybody here has ever done that, though.
Yeah, we're all friends here. Yeah.
Well, no, I know, but just what do you call? I have to say it. If I don't verbally say it, I'll feel weird.
I'm still looking for my friend Kyle.
Gosh darn it.
Okay.
No, I know. They've got certain. There's a word with an R you can't use anymore, and it's not like even an unusual word.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna let you guys keep going. If for some reason I am awake enough to pop in and join in a bit, I'll do it. But otherwise, this is basically your guys' go. Okay, cheers. Oh, and floss. Remember to floss. Everyone remember to floss. Okay.
Good night, AK.
Gun safety, all that. Yeah, okay, bye.
So, okay, so Otto, there's a question from Mr. Chad, or
Yes.
Mr. Chad, Mr. Trad in chat. He says, ask Otto if Putin is zogged.
I wouldn't say. I mean, obviously, there's much closer relations between the state of Israel and the government of Russia under Putin today than there was during Soviet times. I mean, the Soviets completely broke off diplomatic relations with Israel in 1967, and they kept them. They weren't restored till much later. But what you have mostly is the reason for the close relations is the very large population of I don't know. The Brazilian word is yo-yos, but these are Jews from Russia that have Israeli and Russian passports and keep moving back and forth between the two states. There's about 1 million of them. And so these are a constituency for both Netanyahu and Putin as far as votes, but also money. Some of them are quite rich. And also, there's a lot of trade going on. Obviously, you've got that many people moving back and forth. A lot of economic activity going on.
I've heard that Putin, his daughters have like married into Jewish families or something like that.
It's possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean here's the thing, right? Is that
I mean, I'll tell you what. I've been to Israel once,
Mhm.
and I got around in two languages. One was English, the other was Russian. But I noticed that all of the Israelis I was with, um, they only use Hebrew if they were speaking to other Israelis outside the group. Otherwise, they preferred to speak in Russian to themselves. So, in terms of their uh, kind of worldview outset, these people are heavily Russianized, so they've maintained very close relations with Russia. And that they keep going, as I said, they keep going back and forth physically. One thing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a very nuanced, kind of very gray area topic to talk about, like the whole idea of are the Russians zogged and things like this. From my point of view,
Hi everybody, how you doing?
I'm not. I mean,
Hi people.
okay, sure, yeah.
I got
Putin,
Facebook over here and I got
will
YouTube
meet up
over here.
with
Let me turn
Netanyahu,
down the music, you guys,
and
before
they'll
they
talk
cut me
about
off because I didn't pay for it.
stuff.
But anyway,
But I mean,
so
Right,
nice
because
to
they
see
share
you
a million
guys here.
voters between them. The guys vote
Hi
twice. They
everybody,
moved from
how you
Russian
doing?
elections to Israeli elections.
well, I mean, it's not just that, but I mean, Russia, has a big political influence, geopolitical influence.
Hi
And
everybody, how
Israel
you
has a big
doing?
geopolitical influence as
Hi.
well. Like, I mean, so of course they're gonna meet up and talk with each other and things like this. I think a lot of people really want these kind of black and white answers where with no gray scale in between, where like either Russia is pro-Israel or Russia is anti-Israel. Either you're anti-Jewish or you're pro-Jewish. And it's just like, no, I mean, come on, the real world, unfortunately, for people who are still in their early 20s, maybe even mid or late 20s, the world, I'm sorry, it does not work that way. you know and yeah, I'm sorry, Russia is not going to anti Samson option Israel tomorrow. That's just not gonna happen.
I feel like the question of whether or not Russia is zogged is almost like a chicken or egg question. Like,
That's an interesting point as well. Yeah, I mean, you look at Russia was where the Judeo-Bolshevik Soviet Union was started. Yeah, so there is a lot of Jewish influence in Russia, definitely. But to say that because of that in the modern times, Russia is just going to capitulate to anything that Israel desires
Well,
is a little bit
obviously they haven't because Russia is close allies with Syria and
right.
Iran.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of people, they just want like a very simple black and white answer, and the world just does not work that way, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. Who knows? I don't know.
I mean, as I said, I think uh, the interest that Russia has for good relations with Israel is mainly the fact that there's a million dual citizens, and they keep moving back and forth, and there's a lot of particularly trade and commerce as a result. Their geopolitical interests are obviously in maintaining the military base in Latakia in Syria, which is against the Israelis. But I haven't seen any evidence that their trade relations and the these Russian Israelis have impeded Russian support for Assad.
Yeah, I mean, dude, as long as Russia is standing up for Syria, is standing up for Iran, I mean, you can't. There's no way that you can say that they are zogged. It's maybe to a certain percentage you could say that, but not to any overwhelming extent.
No, I mean, and, you know, it's. I'm sure that Netanyahu has tried to put pressure, and I'm sure Putin has said, you know, no. So I mean, but the thing is, the Russians don't have the interest the Soviets used to have in supporting the Palestinians. Of course, nobody except the Palestinians has that interest anymore, it appears, except the Iranians, which
Well,
is
and
odd because the Iranians are not Arabs.
yeah, and you know, look what happened when the what was it, the Russian surveillance plane was shot down during the Israeli airstrike on Syria, right? They said that the Syrian air defense actually shot down the Russian plane because the Israeli F-15 like got in the line of fire, right? Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Yes, yes. So okay, so this Israeli F-15, while they were attacking Syria, um, the Syrians launched, you know, their what I think it was like S-200s or S-300s maybe. Um, they launched a missile at this Israeli F-15, and then it maneuvered in between the line of fire between that and a Russian radar plane that was flying above. Um, yeah, and after that Russian plane was shot down, you know, Putin, like, dude, he set up a personal meeting with Netanyahu. So like, dude, what the fuck, you know, what the fuck's going on, man? Like, like to say that Russia is just going along with anything that the gems want is is
I would. I don't think I've ever alleged that. I just alleged
no, I'm
that
not saying that you did.
there is a
I'm just
relationship as a result of this Russian Jews, Russian-speaking Jews that maintain their Russian passports as well as Israeli passports. So
oh
they,
yeah,
um,
I don't
but
I'm not
certainly geopolitically, the Russians' strong support of Syria because of the naval base, strong support of Iran. Because, be frankly, Iran's like the only major power that's sane. The Turks have seemed to have gone off the edge, and the Saudis were never very stable.
well, dude, the Saudis are just a fucking joke, you know, like if it wasn't for US intervention, you know, Saudi Arabia would be, a fucking, you know,
Western Iran.
yeah, basically, right?
Rojava, Persia.
Yeah.
In a more perfect world.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to it. Yeah, either. Yeah, exactly, Goose. I gotta grab a glass of water real quick. I'll be right back. But you guys can keep talking.
Have you been to Iran, Otto?
I haven't been to Iran. Been close to it, but not actually across the border. The way they've set it up is you've got to. Well, I don't know. It may get more difficult now, but it used to be you had to go and if you were a U.S. citizen and get in some sort of one of their tour groups that would take you everywhere. You couldn't individually just wander around as a U.S. citizen.
I would love to travel there one day. See places like Isfahan and I've
I
known a
know
few.
a number of Americans who have been to Iran.
Yeah.
They said they loved it. I'm not sure it would be all that different than Iraqi Kurdistan, because Persian and Kurdish culture are very close.
I have not been far. I've I've been to Mexico once. That's about it.
I've been to Mexico. I've been to, as I said, the last foreign country I was in would have been Iraqi Kurdistan, and before that I was in Turkey, and before that Russia, and then back Iraqi Kurdistan.
Now, have you taught in quite a few different countries?
I taught in Iraqi Kurdistan from 2016 to 2019. I taught in Ghana from 2011 to 2016, and I taught in Kyrgyzstan from 2007 to 2010.
What was teaching in Ghana like?
It was great. They just didn't pay enough.
How about Kyrgyzstan?
It was okay. It was a Soros institution.
I believe I
But
have
I lost my job in the 2010 revolution.
Oh, there was a revolution there in the 2000s?
Yes, the CIA overthrew the government and one of the colored revolutions that Soros likes to fund. They call it the Tulip Revolution, I believe.
That darn CIA. They get up to their shenanigans. I think I have a friend whose family actually has done missionary work there, I believe. No, I'm sorry. That's Tajikistan. You ever been anywhere further east?
South Korea.
Oh. Was that for work at all, or just
It was
travel?
an academic conference.
Where did you study?
School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London.
London. Nice. When's the last time you've been to London?
I went to a conference on cotton in Central Asia in 2005.
Oh, I didn't hear the end of that.
2005.
That was the year I went to Mexico, actually. Just a little mission trip when I was 15. Mostly just laying concrete and singing songs to kids who lived in houses made of trash. It's kind of interesting.
So what, you're trying to convert Catholics to Protestantism?
That's the funny thing that only occurred to me later is like, well, aren't Mexicans already Christian? What were we doing? I think
That's what I was thinking.
I think it was just more of a kind of, a trip to just sort of introduce teenagers to missionary work and just help a Protestant church down there kind of get up and running and get certain things. Like we just help them with kind of renovating stuff and cleaning up and
If only they're Christian, then they can truly be Americans, right?
oh boy, yeah, man. And we were just across the border too. It was in Tecate, and it was gross.
At least they weren't Judeo-Christians.
Judeo.
Dude, aren't all Christians Judeo-Christians nowadays?
No.
Not all, but most.
They were real strict when I converted when I was in Ghana to the Presbyterian Church. There was a new covenant, that the Jews had blown the old covenant.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. But I mean, that kind of talk is that's very esoteric kind of
Yeah, but
arguments.
the black African Calvinists don't care, so.
Black Calvinists.
There's a lot of black Calvinists.
Huh.
They're all in Africa, but.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, Otto. Since you taught in Ghana,
yeah,
and you know who controlled opposition, right? Is
it's the Dutch guy.
Yeah, the Dutch guy. Yeah. He loves to talk about how, you know, if an African moves to the Netherlands, and they absorb the culture, they become a true Netherland. They learn the language and all this stuff. They can become a European. Like, uh, is that kind of your opinion as well? Like, do you see? I mean,
Well, there's several things going on. They can acculturate. I
mhm,
don't think assimilation is actually possible. But the problem is even acculturation, uh, the adoption of the ways of people doing things, like obeying their laws and their ways of doing things, becomes impossible once the numbers get around 10% or more. So, yeah,
yeah,
you can acculturate a few Africans, particularly if they're on the higher IQ scale and educated. You can certainly acculturate them so it can be integrated in the economy. I don't think they'll ever be assimilated, but if you take in, to the point where 10% of your population is now Nigerian, then the Nigerians will have no incentive to acculturate. They can now create their own enclaves where they don't have to adopt to your ways, and they can maintain their old ways within your country. And this is where you start to get conflict, because they can also now start to use the power of their numbers to try and maintain that a system by taking resources from the host country.
yeah. And to me, like when Konop brings up these kind of arguments, it seems like a very selfish kind of argument. Um, to where it's basically about brain drain, right? Where okay, fine, yeah, the smartest people can move to Europe, and yeah, you might be able to fuck some Negro pussy or some shit like that. But I mean, if we're looking at the grand scheme of things, if we're looking at the wider position of the world, I mean, is it really a good thing to allow these Africans to move to Europe? I mean, allowing these higher IQ Africans to move to Europe, it only hurts the Africans themselves.
Oh, you mean by moving the human capital from Africa?
It's
Right.
not great
Yeah,
for the
exactly. Yeah.
Europeans either, I'd say.
Yeah, this is an argument been made by for a long time in the third world, that the brain drain. But uh, I mean, in a way, the bad governance in Africa, where they don't pay their skilled laborers enough, is one of the reasons they have this problem. People generally don't want to leave their homeland. They do so because the economic situations make it impossible to stay. But my own personal experience is that there's a huge difference between taking one African guy in and taking in a million African guys. So from the opposite point of view, Ghana is 99% plus black. So
Mhm.
when I came and lived there for almost 6 years, it wasn't a problem because I was literally just the one white guy. I was in a church of over 1,000 people. There were two white people in that congregation. So it meant there were 998 black people, two white people. The neighborhood I lived in, I was the only white guy. Right. So it just, Dr. Bull is a white guy, and since there's no enclave, he has to like acculturate and follow Ghanaian ways. Right. But if I had come in and had been thousands of me, then there would have been conflict instantly.
Right. Yeah. And I've actually talked with Conop about this as well, and I said, what percentage of non-Europeans is too much? And he said 20%, and it's just like,
I would say once you get about coming in close to 10%, so starting around 8% or so, you're going to start to get some serious problems.
yeah, I would totally agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, I think, and this is the point that I'm getting to, is that I think that, when Kanop talks about these kinds of multiculturalist issues, he's so naive in the way that he actually tries to address them. It's just unfortunate, to be honest.
I mean, if you if you think about it the opposite way, there's very little racial conflict in Ghana because it's 99% black, and whereas
Yep.
South Africa, which is now gone from 25% white to 8% white, has been plagued with conflict between Europeans and Africans from the very beginning of their meeting, because there were enough Europeans that they could assert their interests, which were very different than those of the Africans.
Well, I mean, not only that, it's not just the percentage, but I mean, you look at the political situation in South Africa,
Well,
where
the percentage of whites was large enough that they could take control of the state. If it had just been one guy, obviously that wouldn't have happened.
true, but you are correct. I think though that with South Africa, the a lot of the problems happen. We look at the kind of like modern kind of media influence as well, where a lot of these South Africans are saying that, oh, these white people, they stole our land. We need to take it back from them. We need to enact all of these political policies. And that has a huge influence on the animosity that goes on there as well.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this isn't new. I mean, there's been political conflict over the land since the Afrikaners started moving north, the Great Trek, and encountering the Bantus that were coming south, particularly the Zulus, who were conquering they came from the north to conquer into the south, and the Boers were moving away from the British up to the north, and they encounter each other. And
But
of course, when you have two uh, powers encounter each other that are radically different, that want the same resources, you always get conflict.
correct me if I'm wrong, though, but weren't the lands that the Bantu occupied, weren't they legally bought by the South Africans?
You mean there were some? I mean, it's a mixture, but there's just like in the case of the United States, there's a number of military conflicts. So quite a bit of the land is militarily conquered in warfare.
Well, okay, so here let me put this another way. The original land that the South Africans colonized, it
You're talking about
wasn't.
the Cape?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm talking after the Cape. I'm talking about when the Afrikaners
But it was
leave
all
the Cape because they
Khoisan.
don't want to be under English rule, and move into the Oranje Vrystaat and Transvaal and the Great Trek. That is when they
The
first
land
encountered
was
the Bantus.
still that land was still purchased. Like they I mean,
Not all of it, some of it.
not all of it.
It's
Some,
mixed.
right. I mean,
But even when you have the purchasing of land, it doesn't mean there's not going to be military conflicts. I mean,
I
there's
don't
a
know this.
lot of kind of low-level frontier warfare as they move north.
mhm.
Are you talking about how it, like, did it used to be Dutch? Did it go from Dutch to British? Is that what
It
happened?
was Dutch, and the British took over the Cape in the Napoleonic Wars, and they gave Indonesia, which they also took, back to the Dutch, but they kept the Cape. And though a lot of the Dutch decided they didn't want to live under English rule and moved inland, but at the same time, the Bantus were moving south, particularly the Zulus. So this is where they encounter each other, and this is where you start to have conflict.
Well, so but, real quick, Goose. I mean, so if the Bantu were moving south, I mean,
Yes.
they weren't necessarily the owners of that land either,
No,
right?
the people on the Cape were cohesion.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, when we talk about like the whole issues going on in South Africa right now, where they're basically saying that you can steal land from white people because it was always ours. I mean, that's just factually not
It's
true.
not
The
true at all.
Yeah, the
If
Bantu were not there.
if I'm not mistaken, I think if you take the current region of the country of South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Bantus only began to move into the northeastern part of that landmass maybe 100 or 200 years before Europeans first started colonizing the Cape.
Yeah, that's
Maybe.
about right. That's
Yeah.
correct. They're recent comers. I mean, we know pretty much when they came in because, and there was a shattering of a lot of the smaller Bantu nations by the Zulus, who were considerably more powerful militarily.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean it's all propaganda. It's all ridiculous. And honestly, I mean I wonder, you know, if there wasn't that conflict between the Europeans and the Bantus, I mean, do you think the Bantus would have just completely wiped out the Khoi and San or whatever?
It could very well happen, although they still continue to exist in Botswana, which never had a large European population. Although they're discriminated against pretty heavily in Botswana. An interesting book by a woman named Betsy Head, who was born in South Africa of a white mother, black father, and then went into exile in Botswana. But she wrote some books about how the Botswanan Bantus, the Swana people, horribly mistreated the Khoisan people. Uh, so rather interesting perspective.
Hmm. Uh, Head, what was the last name there?
I think it's Head, Heed. Let me see if I can find it. Betsy Head, I think is her name. She drank herself to death at an early age, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm doing it. If I got it right. Bessie Head. I'm sorry. It's Bessiehead. Bessie Amelia Emery Head. Considered Botswana's most influential writer. But she's originally from South Africa.
Hey guys, I hate to do this, but I'm I one, I'm getting a little bit tired, but two, I've also got to get up early for a stream tomorrow, so I'm gonna sign off.
All right.
But it's
No worries, man. I think I need to sign off too.
All right. So somebody wake up Eki to end the stream.
no, it's just gonna go the full 8 hours, and then
All right. So we just all log off and it goes on its own.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
All right.
But dude, Otto, now that you're in California, man, me, and Eke, yeah, we definitely
Yeah.
gotta get in touch and get lunch or whatever together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looking
All right.
forward to it.
Okay. I will. We'll arrange something.
Yeah, definitely.
All
Yeah.
right. Eid Mubarak.
See Kyle. I mean, have you seen Kyle? Have you seen Kyle?
Yeah, I hear he's going to come on the Luke Ford show on Monday and explain this unfortunate suicide of this white man.
Yeah.
In the
Oh, fucking A. Oh, I love talking to you, Otto. Good times.
All right, good to see you, Ov. I'll
yeah, you
catch you later.
Yep. And Goose, man, good talking to you as well. You're welcome on my stream anytime.
Awesome.
All right.
Have a good
Peace
night,
out, guys. Yep.